Tesla is reporting its earnings tomorrow after the close of trading. All eyes will be focused on margins after it reported low delivery numbers and cut prices earlier this year. A lot has changed since the last earnings call, with the UAW walking out on the big three automakers here in the U.S., and many saying the strike will benefit Tesla, including Ford's executive chairman.
Toyota, Honda, Tesla, and the others are loving this strike because they know the longer it goes on, the better it is for them.
Let's bring in Dan Ives, Wedbush Managing Director. Hey, Dan, good to see you. You are bullish on
Great
Tesla.
to be here.
You know, we've heard a lot of rhetoric that the strike is going to be good for Tesla. And I guess I'm trying to figure out exactly how that is going to play out and whether we're going to see it in the numbers.
I mean, look, it's good for the long term because the biggest competition was coming from Ford, GM, Stellantis in the U.S. And that's why it's really been a champagne on ice moment for Tesla relative to this. But clearly, look, they have their own challenges that they're trying to navigate. But the UAW torpedo has really been a disaster for Detroit.
Wait, but so explain this to me, because why, in the long term, why is it so good news for Tesla? I mean, eventually the workers are going to come back. Eventually, I mean, whether it's a week or even a month, and they're going to start churning out cars again that are going to compete with Teslas. So it feels like, isn't it more of a temporary hiccup than anything more profound here?
Yeah, Julie, I mean, that's obviously a great point, but I think the bigger thing is what the deal ultimately looks like. What the cost intakes are going to be for GM Ford. Do they have to raise prices $2,000, $3,000, $4,000? That's a huge advantage for them relative to Tesla and others. And I think that's really been the frustration here. Just as Mary and Farley are building this EV transformational strategy, the UAW really comes with a deal that is, you know, what I view as just not feasible, just given the business model.
Well, Dan, first of all, I don't know where you are, but I love that backdrop. All of a sudden, I feel like I want to just grab a couple margaritas with you, Dan, and just hang out. But let's talk Tesla. Tomorrow, what are the key metrics, Dan, you're going to be watching? You know, is it margins? Is it deliveries? And what are you expecting on those bogeys?
Yeah, and Josh, great to see you. Look, from a margin perspective, with these price cuts, they've sacrificed margins for volume. So the big focus is going to be 17% gross margin, the auto gross margin ex credit. That's the line in the sand. And then does Musk formally put a flag up there and say the price cuts are basically done? Because that's the problem here, is that once you start going down these price cuts, the fear is you just continue to go down that same road in 2024. And it's very important that margins top out this quarter.
So, Dan, so let me ask you, though. I mean, you're right. Elon Musk has not been shy about this. He's playing a volume game, and if it means sacrificing profit margins, so be it. But in your opinion, Dan, you know the company, you followed it for a long time. Do you think the price cuts are over?
We think about 95% of them are over. I mean, there could still be some price cuts down the road, but I think in China, they're going to really have to stop these price cuts, because ultimately then it's a race to zero, right? And I think that's, even though this has been the right poker move to get to this point, I think going forward, they have to sort of hold the line in the sand. Because if they continue to cut prices and margins continue to tread lower, that would probably be what I'd say is probably the biggest bear case, in which clearly a macro that's not roses and rainbows.
Speaking of something else that investors are watching that they're not necessarily hearing what they want to hear on is the Model 3 refresh. You talk about this in your note, too, as being another area of focus from the call. What do you want to hear from Tesla? What do you think you're going to hear from Tesla on the Model 3 refresh?
It's really about demand. In other words, are you starting to see demand that upticks on the Model 3 refresh? Price points $10,000, $12,000 higher. That's key, especially in China. You know, when you look at the refresh, and look, China's the hearts and lungs of the Tesla growth story here. I think the other focus to Josh's question is going to be Cybertruck. Do they kind of talk about production, any sort of targets? When does production start? When do deliveries start? And this is what I view as a very important call for Tesla.
Dan, I was just going to go there, so you're leading me right to it. On the Cybertruck, Dan, when do you expect that to come rolling off? When do you think that's going to hit? How much do you think they're going to charge for that? What's the price point? And what really do you think demand looks like for the Cybertruck?
Well, I think demand looks super strong. I mean, we'll call it pre-orders. I mean, obviously some of those could churn, but that's going to be upwards of 1 million, right? So I do think there's demand for 500,000-600,000 even off the bat. I think price points 65, 70,000. I mean, when you even look at some of those Rivian price points, I think it's going to be in that category. I think production starts by Halloween, early November. Deliveries start this quarter. And then, going into next year, Street wants to see called 40, 50,000, potentially higher. And that's important to the broader Tesla story, to show that you could talk the talk, walk the walk in terms of the production side.
Say for me again, Dan, what you think the demand is going to be for the Cybertruck?
Look, I think overall demand is for, when I look at over the next few years, 500,000 to 600,000. In terms of what could be. So this is something on a steady state that could be 6-figure unit per year, but it's all about production. I mean, look at what we've seen with Rivian, right? Production has been the issue, not demand.
And Dan, I'm sure we've talked about it before. I'm not a buyer of the Cybertruck. This is not for me. I'm not living in Mad Max the Thunderdome. I don't need to drive a car that looks like that. But I do wonder, listen, if the thing ends up being a runaway hit, if people love driving this thing on the roads, does that up the ante on other car makers to get weirder?
Well, it does. And Julie, remember, I mean, if you're driving this, around, no one's taking your parking spot, right? So I think this is going to be
that's not something in its favor. That's kind of icky about it, in my opinion. But that's just me.
Totally. But look, no doubt, it's up the game. When you look at Rivian, you look at Cybertruck, it's up the game, and that's why it's been so important for Ford with the F-150 Lightning, for GM and others to go after this category. And when it comes to Tesla, yet again, the skeptics will criticize, and I think yet again they'll continue to outperform.
Well, we will see. We'll find out tomorrow night, at least, the latest data point for the company. Dan, we'll let you get back to getting some sun over there or having a margarita. Josh is going to fly out and meet you. Dan Ives,
okay.
Great to catch up with you as always. Thanks.